Hello and welcome back to our demo series on SAP Landscape Management Cloud. In this video, you'll learn what you need to prepare in SAP Landscape Management Enterprise Edition in order to use this as a landscape agent. You'll also learn how to configure a cloud connector and then perform the initial onboarding of SAP Landscape Management Cloud. First, a few words about the landscape agent. The landscape agent can either be SAP Landscape Management Enterprise Edition or the SAP Landscape Management Cloud execution engine. The agent receives API calls from SAP Landscape Management Cloud to start or stop SAP instances, SAP systems including databases, and their virtual machines or VMs deployed in an infrastructure as a service or IaaS environment. In addition, it is also used to discover and monitor the SAP systems and its entities. Now let's start with the necessary steps in SAP Landscape Management Enterprise Edition. First of all, of course, you need to register and configure your SAP systems in SAP Landscape Management Enterprise Edition. Prerequisites include the configuration of the respective cloud managers, as well as creating a so-called Universally Unique Identifier (UUID) for each of your SAP systems. You must also create a technical user with the role SAP_LVM_API_access and assigned to the respective group in the user management engine to execute operations. Each of the managed SAP systems needs a UUID. To create this, we switch to the Operations menu and either create it at a system level or perform it as mass operation for multiple SAP systems. This is what we'll do now. In the search field, we enter UUID, press return, and the respective process is shown, generate and add system/UUID. The pop-up window shows the systems that do not yet have a UUID. Using the checkbox in front of each of the systems, you can choose which systems you want to create the UUIDs for. In our case, we will create the UUIDs for S4D and S4Q. We click Next in the pop-up window and are forwarded to a screen with process steps executed during the generation of the UUID. In this process, SAP Landscape Management Enterprise Edition adds the UUID in an additional line in the default profile and restarts the instance agent. It then adds the generated UUID to the configuration of the respective SAP system in SAP Landscape Management Enterprise Edition. We click Execute to start the process and are then able to monitor this operation in the monitoring UI within SAP Landscape Management Enterprise Edition. Following the creation of the UUID and the configuration of the Cloud Manager in SAP Landscape Management Enterprise Edition, we switch to the configuration of the Cloud Connector. With our Cloud Connector configuration, we connect SAP Landscape Management Cloud and SAP Landscape Management Enterprise Edition. This is needed so that SAP Landscape Management Cloud can send API calls to SAP Landscape Management Enterprise Edition to start the VMs and SAP systems or gracefully stop the SAP systems before stopping the respective VMs, as well as retrieve the necessary landscape information. So let's log on to our Cloud Connector, and as a first step, we need to define our sub-account. First of all, we need to select our region, and we will search for Frankfurt. We need to select the Cloud Foundry part of Frankfurt, which displays the additional information cf.eu10.hana.ondemand.com. Next, we need to provide the information about the sub-account ID, and this information can be found in the SAP BTP cockpit. Then we enter the login email along with a password. Just a hint, if you're using two-factor authentication, you need to append your password with the key from the two-factor authentication app. Next, we provide a location ID that we will also use when configuring SAP Landscape Management Cloud. Now that we have set up our sub-account, we need to create a connection in the menu Cloud to On-Premise. We start the mapping between virtual and internal system by clicking the plus icon. SAP Landscape Management Enterprise Edition resides on the SAP NetWeaver application server for Java, so we select the corresponding entry from the Backend Type drop-down menu. As a protocol, you can use either HTTP or HTTPS depending on your setup. Then we need to define the internal host and port. These are the host and port of SAP Landscape Management Enterprise Edition. After this, we need to define a virtual host, which can differ from the internal host, as well as the virtual port. Next, we select the principal type. We need to define which host is used in the request header of the API calls. Finally, we can provide a description before we continue with the configuration. The next step involves checking the availability of the internal host by clicking on the respective icon. Once the column Check Result shows Reachable, we can continue and define the endpoint for our API calls. We again click on the plus icon to open the configuration menu. For the URL path, we enter /llama-API and select the radio button, path, and all subpaths before we click Save. Now that we've finished the configuration of SAP Landscape Management Enterprise Edition and the Cloud Connector, we switch to SAP Landscape Management Cloud to complete the last step, which is onboarding. To start the onboarding, we click Configure on the welcome screen and then provide the details of the cloud provider. Let's fill in the fields with our input and go to Step 2. In Step 2, we select which currency we want to use. In Step 3, we decide which landscape agent we want to use. In this case, we select SAP Landscape Management Enterprise Edition. In Step 4, we provide the location ID that we also used in the Cloud Connector. Then we enter the host and port as configured in the Cloud Connector. We can check these details in the configuration of our Cloud Connector by switching back and selecting the Edit button. A pop-up appears and we can review the configuration and look for the values we need for the host and port. We can then switch back to our onboarding menu and enter the respective values. Next, we enter the user for REST API calls from SAP Landscape Management Cloud to SAP Landscape Management Enterprise Edition, reading out the configuration data and also triggering start and stop operations. It's important that this user is granted the role SAP_LVM_API_access and is assigned to the respective group in the user management engine of SAP NetWeaver Application Server for Java to execute operations. In Step 5, we can review the configuration and press Save. When I press Save, SAP Landscape Management Cloud retrieves the configuration from SAP Landscape Management Enterprise Edition. This includes the existing pools and also the configured SAP systems of SAP Landscape Management Enterprise Edition, so no additional system configuration is needed. Once the data is loaded, you can then continue and create uptime patterns, assign these patterns to SAP systems, or snooze them. And you can find out how to do that in another video in this series.